2 months later. In the dim light being cast by the fluorescent lamp overhead, V leaned forward against the sink and studied her reflection in the mirror. She could barely recognize the emaciated woman staring back at her who had decided just a couple weeks earlier to stop taking the pills which had been keeping her mobile and relatively healthy. Her frame had thinned considerably since then, her skin now clinging tightly to her bones. Despite the amount of time she had spent in the sun over the past 2 months, her skin had recently taken a pale tone and an almost translucent quality, revealing the thin veins which lied beneath. Her eyes moved up to her face, a feeling of disgust taking hold in her gut as she took in the current state of her appearance. Her hair had turned brittle, and the normally straight strands which she had always kept well groomed were now beginning to tangle at their roots to reveal more of her scalp. Her cheeks had hollowed, and her eyes had seemed to sink further into their sockets.
I'm a fucking skeleton.
Her eyes themselves, though, proved to be the most telling sign of her deteriorating condition. The sharpness and glimmer which had always accompanied them had been replaced with a dullness which reflected the state of her body. Though the Max docs had done a good job of keeping her comfortable recently, she could still feel a strange discomfort within her as the organs inside her body strained to keep functioning. Her appetite had virtually vanished, and when she did eat, it was an even greater challenge to keep the food down. Her lungs seemed to always be clamoring for more oxygen, tightening and burning even when she laid still and tried to rest. And she was always aware of her heart, which seemed to be beating faster than usual, and yet with a fluttering weakness which indicated the intense strain it was under. V held onto the porcelain surface of the sink, grateful she had been able to latch onto it as she had stumbled into the bathroom. It was still very early in the morning, the sun likely still at least an hour away from beginning to peak above the horizon. As though the darkness hadn't been difficult enough of an obstacle to overcome, her muscles were still burning and shaking due to the light exertion she had just placed upon them. She had awoken in bed as she often did, with a cold sweat on her face. As she breathed in, however, she became conscious her body was shaking. What was even more distressing, though, was V had known something inside of her just felt wrong. She was certain now that her insides were beginning to break down. It wasn't pain necessarily, just a vague yet very real sense that her body was being strained beyond its limits. After she had glanced over to see Judy's sleeping form next to her, V had taken a deep breath and, with every ounce of strength she could muster, had barely been able to sit herself up in bed on her own without disturbing her. The last few days, Judy had been offering to help V with getting up and moving about, though V had refused every attempt when possible. It was already enough for Judy to be seeing to her every need without having to become her full-time caretaker. Still, if her body was insistent on hanging on any longer, she knew it was likely unavoidable, and Judy had already started to help her a few times by getting her from one point to another. Standing slowly as her legs quivered, V had been able to rise and silently make her way to the bathroom, which was across the hall from the bedroom they slept in. As soon as she had rested the door shut, she had quickly turned around and nearly stumbled into the sink from the exertion. Stepping back from the mirror so she could sit on the rim of the toilet, V's eyes drifted to her left arm and the deep gash which now cut across its surface. Though the cut was already a couple weeks old and should have been well on its way to healing by now, it still appeared to be relatively fresh. The steel surface of the mantis blade which rested within had been the only thing which had kept her from losing her arm entirely, and the release mechanism within had been severed, rendering it inert. If her immune system were functioning normally, the skin would be well on its way to scabbing and forming the scar which would reside there the rest of her life. Instead, though the wound was shut, It seemed as though the injury had happened yesterday. Of course, V knew there wasn't any reason at this point to bother with visiting a ripper doc to either get the blade replaced or to have the scar removed. Still, it had been worth it. A small smile spread across her face as V thought back to the events which had led up to that day. 2 weeks earlier. As V sat upon the edge of the boat in her swim shorts and top, she closed her eyes and breathed in the warm air, faintly tasting a hint of salt on the back of her tongue. It was as perfect a day as she could hope for. The late morning sun was shining brightly with hardly a cloud in the sky, and there was just enough of a gentle breeze to keep the sun from being too hot. V lazily dangled her legs in the water, enjoying the feeling of the cool water against her skin. Several miles in front of her, she could just make out the shoreline, a small number of boats dotting the surface of the water in front of her. The gentle rise and fall of the ocean tide was something V had grown accustomed to. Their first few ventures aboard the SS Alvi had been clumsy, to say the least. Judy had initially tried to work the sails which rose above the frame of the deck before shifting to the motor when her frustration had gotten the better of her. After a few days, Judy had sort of gotten the hang of the sails, but the motor was a much simpler option. V did the best she could to enjoy their time on the water, but found that a lifetime of walking city streets had not prepared her for so many hours of time at sea. Still, she felt a small degree of pride that she had not yet gotten sick and thrown up over the side. As they spent more time aboard the boat each day, they began to acclimate and better plan their brief excursions to sea. They found it was best to leave in the morning when the weather was calmer and then head back to shore in the early afternoon before the sun became too hot and the wind began to pick up. They had never dared to venture too far from the shore, though there was little reason for them to do so as a small reef nearby had provided them with a perfect destination point. The reef itself was artificial, a collection of sunken tugs and boats which, over time, had become home to all varieties of coral and fish, wild fish. That had been a shock to V, particularly on their first diving trip when she had spotted a school of small silver minnows gliding effortlessly through the water. She had seen plenty of fish before, but they had always been housed either in farms or in small tanks at the local food markets back in the Haywood district of Night City. Judy had even kept a tank in her apartment with a few fish she owned. But they were always born and lived in some form of captivity, either for food or enjoyment. But V had seen real fish, which had spent their entire lives in the ocean, likely never having seen a person before. And V had felt something beautiful and moving within her as she watched them. A sudden splash of water struck V in the face, jolting her out of her thoughts and forcing her to wipe her face dry. "What the fuck, Judy? Really?" Judy had emerged from the water just a few yards away, prying off her mask to reveal a devilish grin on her face. "Hey, you just looked like you could cool off a little. You're smoking hot in that swimsuit." V scowled as she grabbed a nearby towel and began to pat the black fabric dry. "I was also almost dry in this suit, no thanks to you." Judy rolled her eyes and swam closer, grabbing onto the small deck at the aft of the boat which V was sitting on. She pulled herself up slightly to get closer to V, bumping against the propeller as she did so. In a coy voice, she spoke. "Well, you could always just take it off, so it'll dry faster." V grinned as she leaned forward, bringing her face closer to Judy's. "Thinking you might be able to convince me." Judy edged her face closer, bringing her lips just inches away from V's. Water was dripping from her hair, splashing onto the deck. Involuntarily, V reached up to run her hand through the wet strands, parting it away from Judy's face. Judy had continued to let it grow out, now falling well past her shoulder. The color of her hair was now nearly an even divide of green and a bright pink, though she had also recently applied a vibrant shade of blue to her roots just a couple weeks back. V could see where Judy was going with it and what the intended effect ultimately would be. though by allowing her hair to grow out further, had created a rather unique mix of colors. When V had given her a questioning stare after she emerged from the bathroom with the blue dye bright in her hair, Judy had been adamant she would soon cut it so the green would be gone. With her eyes closed, Judy whispered through parted lips which grazed against the surface of V's. "And then, after it's off, you could slip into that wetsuit again and take another dip with me." V's eyes popped open, and with a sigh, she leaned back. "Not quite what I had in mind." "I know, but I'd much rather see you sliding out of that wetsuit again. Help me up." V shifted so she could extend a hand to Judy, helping to pull her out of the water as she climbed onto the deck. Sitting down next to her, Judy began to remove the flippers from her feet, tossing them into the boat behind her. The ocean current continued to gently bob them up and down. V glanced at her out of the corner of her eye. While Judy had clearly enjoyed their time together since they had left the El Decaldo camp a couple months earlier, seeing Judy in her element had brought V even more happiness than she would have imagined possible. With every excursion and adventure they set out upon, V had made certain to savor every moment, doing everything she could to make certain Judy was enjoying every second and that they were living their lives together to the fullest. Judy would occasionally ask V if there was anything she wanted to do, often feeling guilty at everything being centered around her, to which V would refuse and insist that Judy decide. It was truly as though they had found a slice of paradise together. Judy, seeming to sense V's stare, turned to her as she ran a towel through her hair. "You gotta be starving. Barely touched your breakfast this morning. Want to head in and grab a bite to eat?" V turned to look back at the shoreline in the distance. "Yeah, sounds good. Usual place?" Judy chuckled as she stood. "Sure. Not gonna say no to those fish tacos. Only real food we can find out here anyway. Let me change and I'll take us back in." Judy slung the towel over her shoulder as she climbed over the railing and walked down the narrow flight of stairs into the small cabin, sliding the door behind her. V considered following after her before deciding against it. The mere mention of food had already made her feel queasy, and an unsettling thought had begun to take hold in her mind.
I have to tell her.
Not long after, they had docked the boat back at the pier near the bungalow and had walked across the beach to the nearby hotel. V had found herself unusually winded from the light stroll, though she managed to hide it well by focusing on breathing evenly. The hotel was a moderately pleasant establishment which catered to traveling families, though it did back up to a busy street where the noise of traffic was always present and the neighborhood itself left quite a bit to be desired. Still, there was little sign of the large corporations V was familiar with, which had wrecked so much of the world already, and the businesses which were nearby kept a relatively low profile, aside from the small dollhouse which they had spotted at the far end of the street. V had needed to pull Judy back from wanting to go inside to see the conditions the dolls were working in, not wanting for them to get pulled into something which almost certainly wouldn't end well. The beach itself was relatively packed with tourists and travelers who were enjoying the soft golden sands, and several boats had cast their anchors not far from the shore to enjoy a refreshing swim in the cool waters. The hotel had an outdoor patio with a small hut which served a few local dishes, though V and Judy had decided early on that the fish tacos were really the only thing on the menu that they liked, having been made from actual fish caught from the ocean and not the synthetic kind. Free for visitors of the hotel, their prices were still reasonable, and they often took to stopping by for a bite when they didn't feel like cooking. The waiter, a large man with a pair of red chrome arms which V thought resembled lobster claws, had grown accustomed to seeing them on most days and knew their order without asking. Sitting on the patio, V picked away at the plate of food in front of her. Though she had hoped the sight and smell of fresh food would reawaken her hunger, her appetite simply wasn't there anymore. Ever since V had left Mikoshi and had been given the death sentence she now lived with, She had always been aware of how time was slowly catching up to her day by day. Recently, however, it had taken on a new and more urgent meaning. Death was no longer some distant concept to be mindful of or something she could fight her way out of like she had done before. It was now something near, imminent. And though she was not afraid of it any longer and intended to continue to fight for every day she had left, V also knew it was becoming an increasingly difficult burden for Judy to bear as well.
It's time.
Shortly after they had spoken with Dr. Klein in Portland, V had been dreading this conversation, even as the need for it had become clearer. She had worked through many different variations of it in her head, though she had never found the right combination of words which would take the sting out of what she needed to say. Her lack of appetite and recent shortness of breath could ordinarily be chalked up to any number of causes, but the way she had started to feel in the morning when she woke told her all she needed to know. She was beginning to die.
Best to do it now, rather than wait till the end.
Glancing up at Judy, who was taking another bite from her taco while idly watching the people enjoying the beach, V cleared her throat to get her attention. I need to talk to you, Jude. V's heart dropped as she saw the look in Judy's eyes, the concern. They both knew from experience that conversations which began this way never ended well. Okay. What about? Judy asked skeptically with a raised eyebrow. V reached across the table, inviting Judy to take her hand, which she did, though V noticed the hesitation in her movement. She took a moment to admire the way their fingers wove between one another before she met Judy's gaze. This is gonna be a really shitty conversation, Judy. No sense in trying to sugarcoat it. And it's unfair for me to have to... Judy pulled her hand back in frustration. V, would you just spit it out already? You're just making it worse by dragging this out. What the fuck is it? V paused, searching for the right words. With a sigh, she pressed on. I couldn't take my pill this morning. V watched as Judy's face slowly changed from confusion to realization. Her mouth parted slightly before closing tight. As Judy's brow furrowed in anger and her face flushed, V prepared herself. She already knew how this was going to play out. What do you mean you couldn't take it? Why the fuck not? You can't fuck around with this, V. V ignored the anger in her voice, choosing instead to keep her voice soft as she continued. You know why, Judy. It's starting. Woke up this morning and I could just tell. Just like Matt said, I'd know when things got worse and, well, they are. Getting worse, I mean. Judy's eyes widened as the anger dissolved from her face. She leaned back into her chair before turning to look back out to the ocean. Fuck. V held up her hand as she took a deep breath. There's more, Judy. We need to talk about some things. Arrangements. For after, you know? Judy shook her head, still refusing to look at V. V, I know. Like I said, it's unfair and it's a really shitty thing to have to talk about, but I need to, Jude, before things get bad, before it's too late. Last thing I want is for you to be left with a bunch of unfinished ends. There was silence as V allowed the weight of what she had told Judy to sink in. She could already see the muscles in Judy's jaw clenching, her chest rising and falling faster as the pace of her breathing accelerated. She had once again begun to bite on her nails as she kept her gaze locked in front of her. Fine. Go on. Judy's voice was firm, though V understood the turmoil which was swirling just underneath. V sighed again. She wished Judy would look at her, though she understood how she was feeling and why she wouldn't. Why she couldn't. V slowly pressed on. First, I recorded some messages for a few people. Just a few chooms I really care about. Pan, Vic, Mama Wells, a couple others. You don't need to do anything, Judy. They're set to be sent automatically if I don't check my holo for a day. Judy remained fixed in place, chewing one nail after another. Okay. V nodded slowly, lowering her head briefly as she mustered up the courage to continue. So, on to matters of estate. I've still got— V, please stop, Judy shouted as she quickly spun her head to look at her. V was grateful the patio was mostly empty. The last thing she wanted was for this to play out in front of a crowd. I don't give a shit about your money or— I know, Judy, V interrupted, but we need to get through this. Same thing as the messages. My entire account is set to deposit into yours a day after. It'll give you options, Jude. Real fucking options that I would have just pissed away if I hadn't met you. Judy scoffed as she threw up an arm in exasperation. Options for what, V? What the fuck am I gonna buy that'll replace you? I don't need another fucking boat. V paused for a moment, concentrating on pushing down the small lump which had begun to form in her throat. She had to remain strong to get through this without breaking, for Judy's sake. It's not about replacing me, Jude. I'm talking about options for you to chase down your dreams like you've always wanted to. Which brings me to the next point. You know, I never forgot what you told me about what you wanted to do after leaving Night City, using your editing talents to help people. V turned her eyes away from Judy, choosing instead to look down at the table in front of her. I'll also never forget the way I mocked you for it at that fucking bar. She wasn't sure if Judy had held on to the memory of it or not, with so much else having happened that night, but V wasn't going to take any chances. She refused to leave anything unsaid. She forced her eyes back to Judy's. I am so fucking sorry for that, Judy. More than you'll ever know. V felt a small wave of relief as she saw softness returning to Judy's eyes. You don't need to apologize, V. I honestly had forgotten it until just now. You were just fucking drunk, just like I wish I was now. V nodded. Still, reason why I bring it up? Oh, okay, here we go. I bought a small studio up in Portland for you. The deed is set to assign to you as the legal owner, same way as the Eddies. Judy launched herself from the chair, sending it skidding backwards. What? What the hell are you talking about? Portland? What studio? What the fuck are you doing, V? V stood, reaching across the table to take Judy's hand. Despite the hot sun that shone brightly above them, her skin had turned cool. Reluctantly, she allowed V to guide her back to her chair. As Judy scooted herself back to the table, V sat back down. Please, let me get through this, Judy. I want to give you a real shot at it, at your dream. It's a decent city, Jude. You saw it yourself. Not filled with a bunch of sleazy dollhouses or gangs. Corps haven't stamped their footprint all over everything. I'm sure it's got its pitfalls like every place else, but it's got lots of potential too. Good people live in there. You saw them, and you'll be a lot closer to your abuelas. Could see them more often. And if you decide you don't want to go after it, or if you want to go after something else completely different, you can just sell it, Judy. Do whatever it is you want to do with it. This ain't about straddling you with all kinds of shit to deal with when I'm gone. Once again, Judy turned away from V and leaned forward, placing her elbows on her knees as she rested her head in her hands. V, this is just too much to take in. I can't. I can't process this. Judy waved her hands in frustration, desperately trying to articulate what she was feeling as she tried to make sense of everything. I know, Jude. Nothing you need to do right now. It's all taken care of already, just like I said. Just want you to know what I'm setting up, what I want for you. Which brings me to the hardest part. Judy turned her head to V, her eyes widening in fear as she sensed where the conversation was about to go. Oh, fuck. Sensing that she was on the verge of breaking down, V stood and dragged the chair in front of Judy so she could sit across from her. It was breaking her heart to do this, and she knew it was doing the same to Judy as well. But she forced herself to continue, leaning forward so she was close to her, taking Judy's hands into her own. Judy, let's not kid ourselves. We both know you've been thinking about this, dreading this, and I don't want you worrying or guessing. When it happens, you don't need to do anything special, Judy. Don't call the badges. I don't want to be a name on some lost fucking brick in a columbarium. No holes in the ground either. Judy yanked herself back again as she averted her eyes. The first tears began to spill down her cheeks. This is bullshit. Oh, why the fuck are you doing this to me, V? I've been thinking about this a lot lately, Jude, and I think I settled on something I like. Gonna sound like a complete gonk idea, but you know me. V chuckled to herself, trying to inject a small degree of levity into what she was saying. Judy shook her head. This isn't happening. V reached forward and laid her hands on Judy's face and gently turned her to meet her gaze. Judy's eyes were bloodshot and narrow, and her face was twisted in pain as her lower lip trembled. Feeling the wetness from her tears on her palms, V brushed a hair away from her face. After it happens, I want you to take me out to sea. Find a good spot, and then just let go of me, Judy. A look of shock crossed Judy's face. What? V leaned in further, bringing her face close to Judy's. She still held Judy's face in her hands, though Judy was no longer trying to pull away. V could faintly smell the residue of sea salt on her skin, and she wanted more than anything to kiss and taste her. A hint of a smile formed on V's lips as she spoke, her tone soft and hopeful. I mean it, Judy. I like the idea of giving something back to a thing you love. The ocean, all the life in it. I love the thought of knowing a part of me will always be there with you, with your essence. That I'll always be a part of you in some way. As she spoke, V could see the shock on Judy's face giving way to horror. Her mouth was agape as she searched for something to say. With a choked sob, her eyes squinted shut as her face contorted in agony. I can't fucking do this, V. You promised me you'd fight. V dove forward, wrapping her arms around Judy and holding her as tightly as she could. Her sobs were uncontrollable now as her whole body shook. V focused on comforting the woman she held in her arms, even as her own tears began to form in her eyes. Rubbing her back gently, she allowed a hand to move up to the back of Judy's head, cradling her against her neck. V whispered, I am, Judy. I'm still fighting for every fucking second I've got left, and you can do this. You will. She could feel Judy grabbing hold of her, her hands twisting tightly into her shirt. The shrillness in Judy's voice as she screamed cut through V, causing her to flinch. Oh my fucking God! V nestled her face in Judy's neck, closing her eyes as the tears which had been welling within them were released. I'm sorry, Judy. I love you so much. Between choked sobs, Judy whispered, I love you too. Time seemed to pass endlessly as they held and comforted each other, slowly allowing the grief to pass. V couldn't suppress the stab of guilt which struck her as she held Judy. She knew these were practical things they needed to talk about. The last thing she wanted was for Judy to find her lifeless body laying next to her one morning with no idea of what to do. Still, it didn't make her feel any better to have devastated her on such a beautiful day. And there were so few of them left. V sniffed as she wiped her eyes, pulling herself back so she could look Judy in the eyes. She forced a smile to her face. Okay, you know what? Fuck this. We're not letting the day get spoiled like this. Finish that taco, Alvarez, because you're taking me diving as soon as you're done. And I'm on the hook for dinner tonight. Gonna mix us up something good. All the fixings. Judy chuckled as she wiped away her own tears. Fuck. No offense, V, but I don't know if I can handle any more of your cooking. V laughed as she pulled Judy in and kissed her, indulging herself in the warmth and taste of her lips. Later that evening, V and Judy were resting upon a blanket they had laid out upon the small beach in front of the bungalow. They had lit a small campfire nearby, filling the air with the pleasant smell of burning hickory, which reminded them both of their nights with the Aldecaldos. The sun slowly set over the ocean, casting a dazzling display of reflections glimmering across the ocean's surface. Overhead, V could make out a single star faintly shining above them through the ambient glow of the city lights behind them, which were steadily getting brighter. This had been their routine almost every night since they had arrived, and there had been little reason to deviate except for the times when it rained. The beach had been littered with driftwood when they had arrived, and V had decided to kill two birds with one stone by collecting all of it for their evening fires, while also providing them with a clean space to enjoy. V did secretly wish the bungalow had been more remote, though. While it was still quiet and the proximity to the nearby hotel was desirable, the bright lights from the city at night tended to dredge up uncomfortable memories. She had found herself on edge the first few days, a part of her almost expecting a gang war to erupt nearby or for an Arasaka convoy to burst in on them. But while V didn't hold any doubts that the city was filled with some of the same toxins which had poisoned Night City for so many, her fears had not come to pass. There were no sounds of nearby gunfire, no unwanted visitors, only themselves. They had returned a couple hours earlier after venturing back to sea and enjoying another dive at the reef. V was grateful at how carefree the experience had been, particularly after their earlier conversation. It was as though an invisible burden had been lifted from their shoulders. Though they couldn't stay at the reef for too long as the sun began to wane, they had caught sight of many varieties of fish swimming about them, including a small shark in the distance. As they had been about to ascend to the surface, Judy had gasped and called V's attention to the ocean floor. The seabed was lined with hundreds of starfish, and V had needed to remind Judy they were running short on oxygen and needed to get back to the surface to pull her away. Another time, perhaps. As V sat in front of the fire and thought back to the sight of the starfish which littered the ocean floor, her hand found its way onto her abdomen, her fingers delicately tracing across the legs of the starfish tattooed on her skin. A slight breeze brought a chill to her skin, causing her to rub her arms together to try to warm them. She was about to offer to Judy to head inside to get their jackets when Judy rose from her chair. "Gonna grab my jacket. You want yours or a blanket?" V smiled. "Read my mind. A blanket, please." Judy nodded and went inside while V stood to grab another log from the stack nearby. As she sent it crashing down onto the fire, a plume of smoke and ash rose into the air. Not long after, Judy emerged wearing V's leather jacket, a thick blanket bunched up under one of her arms. V noticed Judy had also carried a small bowl of ramen noodles in her free hand. Cooking had never been an even remotely strong suit for V, though she had strived over the last 2 months to at least learn how to cook noodles the way she used to enjoy. Though she was still a long way off and would likely never perfect the recipe, she was pleased when Judy ate them without complaint. Her own appetite, however, had been fleeting as she managed only a few bites. Judy set the bowl down on her chair before walking over to where V sat, draping the blanket over her. V grinned as she playfully pulled the blanket up to her chin, cuddling it tightly against her skin. "Stop it, you gonk," Judy said with a small smile. She then handed the bowl to V. "Here, you've hardly eaten anything today." V accepted it, forcing herself to pick through the noodles and shove them into her mouth. Even as she swallowed the first bite, she could already feel her stomach beginning to turn slightly. Knowing she had to eat, though, and not wanting to worry Judy further, she begrudgingly kept at it even as her stomach protested. Judy sat back down across from her, once again turning her eyes to the horizon. The sun had just dipped below the ocean, causing the sky to begin to turn a dark shade of violet. There was a light roar from overhead as a pair of cars flew far above towards the city. As V put another forkful of noodles into her mouth, a slight shuffle from Judy caught her attention. She was rummaging through her jacket pocket, and V assumed she was going to take out her hollow. Instead, she felt a jolt of disbelief as Judy's hand emerged holding a pack of cigarettes. Where had those come from? Judy stood as she took one out of the pack, taking a step towards the fire and holding it over the flames. A moment later, she pulled it back and took a long drag, holding the smoke in her lungs before releasing it into the air. "Judy?" Judy glanced at V, raising an eyebrow as she did so. Her expression already told V she knew what she was going to say. I know. Don't start on me, alright? It's been a day, V. I'm not relapsing or anything, just need something right now to take the edge off." V watched as she took another drag. Unconsciously, her hands balled into fists as a surge of anger suddenly rose within her chest, causing her to toss the bowl of noodles to the ground as she rose. Without saying a word, V stormed over to Judy and snatched the cigarette from her fingers. Before she could protest, V flicked it into the fire. "Hey, what the fuck, V? You're not doing this, Judy. Not about to sit here and watch you start puffing your way to an early grave when I've already got one foot in my own. It was one thing when Evelyn died. Not again. If you're gonna quit something, then fucking quit it." V stopped. She realized she was standing just inches away from Judy. Her voice had been steadily rising as she spoke, and she had nearly jabbed her finger into Judy's chest as she emphasized her last words. Taking a deep breath, she took a step back. Judy stared back at her, a mixture of surprise and anger on her face. Finally, with an exasperated sigh, she turned and plopped herself back into her chair. "Fine. Fuck it." V shook her head. I'm sorry, Judy. Don't worry about it, V. I get it. It's fine. Let's just sit and enjoy the evening." The finality in her words made V's heart drop as she turned and sat back down. Judy leaned to the side as she tried to shove the pack of cigarettes back into her pocket. As she did, V caught sight of something fall out and land on the sand next to her. Judy made a desperate attempt to clutch it away before V could see. "You've got your abuela's necklace?" Judy stared at V as though she had been caught in a pair of headlights. Slowly, she opened her fist to reveal the crucifix. Yeah. Just keep it around sometimes is all." "You should wear it, Jude. It's what they wanted for you." Judy studied the necklace as she toyed with the chain between her fingers. V could see she was contemplating it, and something told her this wasn't the first time she had done so. Instead, Judy shook her head. "Don't think so." Judy motioned to slide the necklace back into her pocket, but before she could, V felt the words escape her lips before she could stop them. "Can I?" Judy froze and looked at her. You Want to wear it? I mean, I'd like to, if it's all right with you. Judy looked at V carefully before glancing back down at the crucifix, seemingly lost in thought. A moment later, she stood and walked towards V. Here, you can wear it. Just don't go and lose it down the drain or anything. V smiled as she weighed the necklace in her hands for a moment before undoing the small clasp and wrapping the chain around her neck. After she fastened it, V peered down and rested her hand on top of the crucifix. Thought you didn't believe in that stuff, Judy asked quizzingly. V looked at Judy, pausing for a moment to take in the sight of the dancing orange light which flickered across the surface of her face. Her memory flashed back to the night of the heist. The fixer who had arranged the job, Dexter Deshawn, had put a bullet through her head that night. In the hour which passed before the biochip had resuscitated her, V had been dead, but she hadn't remembered a thing. No suffering fires or any light at the end of a tunnel, only a void. Yet now, a part of her felt a strange connection to something she couldn't define, something more than what she was. I don't believe, Jude. Guess you could just say I hope. Something flashed behind Judy's eyes. When we were leaving my abuela's a couple months back, my abuelo said something to you. Didn't catch it that time, and don't mean to pry now, but, well, what did he say to you? Don't mean to pry, huh? Seeing Judy's discomfort, V laughed. It's all right, I'll tell you. Remember it clearly, and I think you're probably onto something anyway. Told me, keep fighting, V, and have faith in our little girl too. She's stronger than she knows. Just needs to have faith in herself, and you can tell her that yourself in your own time. Take care, V. We'll always love you. And that was it. They stared at one another in silence. V could see a wetness behind Judy's eyes as her mouth parted, then quickly closed. She turned back to the fire, shielding her eyes. He was right, Jude, V continued. You're tougher than nails, survived some of the worst shit Night City has to offer. And I think maybe you got used to hearing it all the time, but you don't really believe it even though you should. Like he said, you ought to have faith in yourself. V. Judy's voice trailed off, unsure of what to say. V smiled. It's all right. Not about to give a sermon or anything. Besides, not planning on holding on to this forever. Just keeping her warm for you till you're ready to get her back. Though Judy shook her head, V could see a smile creep across her lips. The next day, V had awoken feeling worse than she had the day before. Her body felt as though she had run a marathon, and when she had stood up from bed, she had become lightheaded and nearly fallen over. More than anything, though, she felt tired and run down. After injecting herself with a Maxstock, though, she felt herself feeling better, and they had decided to go back out to the reef, making sure to take an extra Maxstock with them just in case. Couple hours later, V was pulling on her wetsuit and cleaning the inside of her diving helmet. Though the air was warm, the sky was cloudier than it had been the day before. While it was still not likely to rain, judging from the puffy nature of the clouds which passed overhead, there were enough of them to keep the sun mostly obscured. She just hoped it wouldn't be too dark below the surface. Judy hadn't brought any flares or lights to help them see. Sure you're up for this? Judy asked, eyeing her carefully. She was already fully suited up and standing on the edge of the boat waiting for her. V had moved as fast as she could, though the achiness in her muscles hadn't fully dissipated and had slowed her down some. A thin, chrome tube was attached to the back of Judy's helmet, working its way into the long coil before ending at the small oxygen tank which rested on the deck behind the railing. Judy had been disappointed by the relatively short length of her excursions and had wanted the oxygen line so she could stay underwater longer. "Was born ready, Jude," V grinned as she threw the helmet over her head, carefully adjusting it to make sure it sealed properly. Once she was sure of the fit, she walked to where Judy stood and raised an arm and gestured to the ocean. "After you." Judy smiled and jumped into the water, V following right after. The sounds around her became muffled, and V quickly felt the coolness of the ocean water pressing against her suit. She was relieved to see they could still make out the ocean floor beneath them despite the clouds above. Together, they swam their way towards the reef. V enjoyed the feeling of slowly sinking into the various wrecks which were cast about the ocean floor. The ruins were largely covered in coral now, though a suggestion of their definitions still remained, an eerie echo of what they had once been. For nearly an hour, V and Judy swam about, occasionally pointing out a fish or something of interest which captured their attention. Before long, V noticed the oxygen gauge on her suit was beginning to get low. "I'm heading up. You gonna stay down a bit longer?" Judy nodded, a small trail of bubbles leaving the back of her mask. "Yeah, wanna check out those starfish we saw the other day. Maybe grab one for our place. Do me a favor, will you? When you're back on board, can you move the boat maybe 100 yards or so that way so you can pull me over there?" Judy pointed off in the direction of where they had been the day before. "Would save me some time." V looked at the direction Judy had pointed to, unsure of what the exact distance was. "I can pull you over there, but might be better if you just stay on the comm and let me know when you want me to stop. Don't want you getting pissed at me for dragging you for miles all over the sea." Judy laughed. "Sounds good. I'll keep the comm open and you do the same. Just keep the engine low." "Aye, aye, Judy." V nodded and ascended to the surface. The wind had picked up a bit and the tide had grown stronger since they had left. The boat was now rocking up and down at a good pace, nearly throwing V off balance as she climbed over the railing. Peeling off her mask, she pulled the comm out of the inside of it and attached it to her neural port. After seeing the connection sync to her cyberware, V grabbed a towel to dry her hair as she worked her way to the captain's seat, being careful not to lose her balance. Though Judy had managed to work the sails after their first few trips, they had both come to realize quickly that the gas motor was a much easier and more practical solution. Reaching the upholstered captain's seat, V sat down. A steering wheel rested on the dash panel in front of her, surrounded by a cluster of gauges and buttons. The ignition switch and accelerator lever were just below. V turned the key, which they always left in the starter, and pressed the ignition. The engine behind her roared to life, belching out a thin gray smoke as it did. Taking a quick look around to make sure no errant boats were going to cross her path, V slid the accelerator to its lowest setting. There was a loud clanking sound from the engine as it switched gears, and slowly the boat began to glide through the water, gently crashing against the waves. Though the boat was moving as intended, V knew the noise which had come from the engine didn't sound right. She had hardly gone more than 10 yards when she heard Judy's voice shouting through the comm, "V, stop the engine!" V quickly grabbed hold of the accelerator and tried to pull it up to neutral. It was stuck in place, the boat continuing its slow trek forward. She slapped down repeatedly on the ignition button, though as long as the engine was being fed gas from the accelerator, the engine wouldn't turn off. "V, stop it now! It's dragging me up!" Judy's voice was panicked, and V could make out the faint sound of water rushing past her. Another noise from behind her caught V's attention. Turning around, she saw that the oxygen line which was connected to Judy's helmet was now draped tightly over the edge of the back of the boat. A jolt of terror struck V as she suddenly realized what was happening. The oxygen line had gotten snagged on the propellers and was rapidly wrapping itself around the blades, dragging Judy towards it. Sprinting out of her seat, V dashed to the edge of the boat. The oxygen line was slanted straight down into the water, and she could just make out below the water the thin line wrapping itself around the propeller blade. "V, fucking hurry!" V's eyes darted about, the terror within her growing as she tried to think of what she could do. From inside the boat, there was nothing she could think of which would stop the propeller from pulling Judy in. Even if she cut the line on the deck with her mantis blades, The line had become too wrapped around the propeller below the water. It would just continue to pull Judy up until she was minced by the blades. She had to somehow find a way to get the propeller to stop fast. Without any further hesitation, V dived into the water. She opened her eyes and quickly caught sight of the oxygen line, slowly pulling away from her as the boat steadily cruised away. Just as the line was nearly out of reach, V snatched onto it and began to feel herself being pulled through the water towards the propeller. Glancing down, she saw Judy not far below her, desperately struggling to try to disconnect the hose from her helmet. V considered her options. She was now being dragged towards the propeller also, its sharp blades spinning at a dizzying pace. She could try to cut through the line with her blades, but it was chrome-coated, and since she was submerged, she wouldn't be able to get enough leverage to gain the needed force to slash through it. Staring at the rapidly approaching propellers, another idea came to mind, one which filled her with dread.
Fuck.
V braced herself, and just as she was about to collide with the propeller, thrust her arm forward. She felt a sudden, forceful jerk against her arm, followed immediately by a sharp stab of pain, causing her to scream. Her mouth immediately filled with water. Letting go of the line, she could make out the shape of the boat above her slowly coming to a stop as the broken blades of the propeller sunk beneath her. Glancing down, she saw Judy grabbing onto the line and reorienting herself. Nearly out of breath, V desperately began to swim up. Her lungs were on fire when she breached the surface, gasping for air and immediately letting out another scream of pain. The water around her quickly began to turn red as blood spilled from her arm. Judy surfaced a moment later, quickly ripping the helmet off her head. Swinging her head around, her eyes locked on V. "V!" she shouted as she began to swim towards her. Still holding onto the oxygen line, which was still stuck to what remained of the base of the propeller, V clutched her wounded arm to her side and tried to swim her way to Judy, though she could barely move against the waves. Before long, she felt Judy's hands grab onto her and pull her close. "Hang on to me, V. I'll pull us in." As V wrapped her good arm around Judy's waist, Judy began to pull them back towards the boat, which had come to a stop about 30 yards away. V could feel herself becoming dizzy as they reached the boat and was faintly aware that she was shivering. Finally, they reached the deck of the boat, Judy grabbing onto it. V, stay with me. Grab onto the deck so I can get up and pull you in." V managed to reach up and take hold of the edge of the deck, though at the pace the boat was rocking up and down, she was nearly submerged each time the boat sunk. A pair of strong hands clasped under her arms and began to lift her up, the muscles within them shaking from the exertion. As V felt herself rising from the ocean, she tried her best to support her weight on the deck before she finally splashed onto it, but Judy continued to drag her back until they had passed the small gate in the railing. Finally, Judy let go of her. "Hang on, V." Judy raced into the cabin in search of the first aid kit. V laid flat, struggling to lift her neck as she turned her head towards her injured arm. Her eyes widened at the sight. A deep gash sliced through the length of her arm, exposing the chrome and broken circuitry of the mantis blades which resided within them as blood continued to pool out of the wound. The blade itself had been partially severed, the spring mechanism completely smashed, though it had likely been the only thing which had kept her from losing her arm entirely. V heard steps raising up the cabin stairs. "I'm here, V. Just hang on." Judy knelt next to her and before V knew what was happening, felt a needle pierce her chest. As the MacStock quickly worked its way into her, V felt the fogginess in her mind begin to clear. As she tried to lift herself up, Judy shoved her back down and quickly sprayed a hypo over the cut, causing V to hiss in pain. "Ow! Fuck! Ow!" V yelled. Tossing the hypo aside, Judy took out a bottle of organic adhesive and began to apply it to V's arm, slowly pinching the wound closed bit by bit. V watched as Judy continued the work of tending to her cut. When the gash was sealed, Judy began to wrap gauze around her arm. "What the fuck happened?" V asked. Judy shook her head angrily. "I was a stupid fucking gonk is what happened. In this current, having the oxygen line draped right next to the propellers was just asking for a fucking accident, which is exactly what happened. Never should have had you start the engine." V winced as Judy pulled the gauze tightly. "Shit, I'm sorry." V managed a small smile. "It's okay, Jude." Judy stared at V's arm then settled down next to her. No, it's not, V. Look at this. It's a fucking miracle you didn't lose your arm just now, that I didn't get my head taken off. V slowly sat up, being mindful not to put weight on her injured arm. She still felt a bit lightheaded, but she also felt something else, deep within her chest. Elation. It began as a low chuckle in the back of her throat, slowly growing into laughter, before V found herself falling back to the deck in hysterics, clutching at her chest to try to catch her breath. When V managed to catch sight of Judy, who was staring at her with a look of absolute bewilderment, she spilled completely into a fit of uncontrollable laughter, rolling from side to side. V? Judy said uncertainly. V continued laughing, her face having turned a bright crimson despite the amount of blood she had just lost. Wiping away the tears which had formed in the cracks of her eyes, V slowly managed to regain her composure, still chuckling to herself as she sat back up. Okay, what the hell is so fucking funny? 'Cause I don't see a damn thing to laugh about here, V. The rising irritation in Judy's voice made V bite her lip as she struggled to keep herself from breaking out in laughter again. V held out her hand to stop Judy while she took a few deep breaths to collect herself. Okay. You're gonna love this one, Jude. Now, think about what you just said. A miracle, right? Well, don't look now, but... V leaned forward slightly, allowing Judy's necklace which she was wearing to part from her wet skin and dangle loosely from her collar, the crucifix swinging idly back and forth. Think someone's trying to tell you something? The expression on Judy's face turned to exasperation as she threw a hand in the air. Oh, come on, V. You don't honestly believe we just experienced a true act of God or whatever? V smiled as she grasped onto the railing and pulled herself up. No, Jude. I don't believe it. But I'll have faith in it. 2 weeks later. As V drifted out of the recent memory and settled back into reality, she realized she had been holding onto the crucifix which was draped around her neck. She had not taken it off since that day. Though she had never been, nor would she ever be, a believer in some higher power, she still found a comfort in having it. The shaking in her legs had subsided, though V could still feel the nearness of death. Reaching across to the sink, she slowly stood herself up and once again looked at her reflection in the mirror. She knew Judy didn't care about how she looked and would never admit to anything but reverence of her beauty, even if it had quickly faded from her. But still, the truth was the truth. They hadn't made love in nearly a week, as V had often found herself too weak or ill to show her affections, or to return Judy's. Judy had done everything possible to make sure V knew it was all right, but V could still see the hurt behind her eyes. The guilt inside of her had been building to a point where it was nearly unbearable.
Is she afraid we'll never make love again? That our last time was truly our last time?
A tear spilled down her cheek, making a flat splatting sound which drew V's attention. It had landed on Judy's makeup case. She stared at it for a long time before her eyes went back to the box of Max Docs which were laying on the floor nearby. An idea began to form in her mind and slowly took shape. There were still 6 or 7 Max Docs in the box, and though V knew they could always get more with just a simple call to Pan, she also knew in her heart there wasn't going to be a need for more. Stumbling over to the box, V picked up one of the needles and jabbed it into her chest. A flood of warmth rushed through, quickly spreading throughout her body. She felt her chest begin to loosen and the illness within her torso subside as her legs ceased their wobbling. V stepped into the shower and turned on the water, quickly washing her body and hair. She had to resist the urge to remain under the comfort of the hot water, finally shutting it off and stepping out to dry herself. As she stepped back to the mirror, V picked up her comb. She hadn't used it in days. She began to run it through the thick pink strands, roughly pulling out the tangles and straightening them the way she had always preferred. Setting the comb down, she opened Judy's makeup case and quickly rummaged through the contents, finding her facial mixes. Finding one which she thought best matched her tone, V rubbed dabs into her fingers and began to apply it to her face, obscuring the lines and paleness which had taken hold of her. Quickly rinsing her hands, she reached back into the case and found a stick of lipstick. Red. V spread it across her lips before tossing it back in. V stopped to study herself in the mirror. Though her form still looked thin, she could at least now recognize the echo of her former beauty looking back at her. Bending down, she took another MAC stock out of the box and pressed it into her skin. The crash afterwards was going to be hard, she knew, but it would be worth it.
She needs this. We both do.
V walked to the door and turned off the light before quietly opening it. She paused for a moment to allow her eyes to adjust to the darkness before stepping across the hall into their bedroom. Slowly opening it, she peered inside. She was relieved to see Judy was still asleep, not having moved from where V had left her. V slowly and silently moved across the room, making her way towards the nightstand next to where Judy slept. Reaching down, her hand found the small switch she was looking for and turned it. In an instant, the room lit up in a soft pink hue from the lights they had taken from the camp and strung above the bed. Judy rustled and slowly opened her eyes. V? As her eyes settled on V, they quickly widened in panic. What's wrong? V leaned over her, pressing a finger to her lips as she whispered. Nothing. Not a single thing is wrong, Judy. I love you so much, and I want to show you. I want you. Now. V cut her off by smashing her lips to Judy's, kissing her with a hungry passion. She ran her hands through Judy's hair, forcing her lips even closer into her kiss as Judy let out a small whimper. Finally pulling herself away, V ripped back the blankets which still wrapped Judy's form. She was tempted to tear Judy's clothes off right then and there, but she barely managed to restrain herself.
Don't rush this, V.
V saw the look in Judy's eyes, a mixture of surprise and confusion. V realized the sudden assault had likely caught Judy by surprise and that her own urgency had propelled her forward too quickly. Slowly, she leaned back down over Judy and brought her face close to hers, the necklace around her neck dancing across Judy's skin. I love you, Judy, V whispered as she kissed her again, this time more slowly. Now she could begin to feel Judy responding beneath her as her own lips worked against hers. V opened her mouth and slid her tongue forward, probing gently against Judy's, which responded in kind. Her heart racing, V allowed her hands to caress Judy's body, working their way across her shoulders and down her arms. She felt Judy's fingers brush against her neck, her hands moving down V's body towards her chest. As V gasped when Judy's hands cupped her breasts, she could feel Judy trembling beneath her.
Slow down, V.
V broke her lips away from Judy and stared into her eyes as she whispered, Breathe, Judy. I'm warm. I'm right here. V slowly ran her hands back up to Judy's shoulders, her fingers tracing their way up her neckline and across her jaw. Slowly, she leaned forward and kissed Judy again, this time as softly as possible. She could feel Judy beginning to calm herself as her trembling subsided. Suddenly, she felt Judy's hand grab onto the back of her head, fingers gripping her hair and pulling her head back. V gasped, her mouth hanging open as Judy clutched her hair, a look of pure hunger in her eyes. "I love you too, V," Judy whispered as she released her hold and began to kiss the sensitive flesh along V's neck. Slowly, she worked her way down, V raising herself up slightly to allow her easier access. When she felt Judy's tongue graze across her nipple, V threw her head back and moaned loudly. The sensation of Judy's tongue flickering across the sensitive nub was nearly overwhelming. When Judy moved her mouth to her other breast, V nearly collapsed. Finally, V released her hand from the back of Judy's head and sat up, pulling herself away from Judy's mouth. Slowly, she scooted her way down and pulled upon Judy's arms, encouraging her to sit up with her. When she did, V kissed her once again as her hands worked through the folds of her shirt. In a smooth motion, V lifted the garment up just as Judy raised her arms, allowing V to easily remove her shirt. Now exposed, V threw the shirt aside and lunged towards Judy's breasts. The groan which escaped from Judy brought a grin to V's mouth as she lashed her tongue across her breasts. Judy collapsed on the bed as V kept her mouth locked on her. When V was satisfied, she began to edge herself slowly downward, trailing her mouth across Judy's abdomen. Dragging her tongue across the starfish tattoo just above her navel, she brought her arms under Judy's legs, raising them up as her tongue worked its way lower. Reaching her underwear, she glanced up at Judy and smiled when she saw her looking back at her. As Judy's hand grabbed her hair, V gently rolled her tongue across the sensitive spot the underwear still concealed, taking delight in feeling Judy arch her back slightly to meet her mouth. But V was determined to keep going slow as she moved her mouth towards Judy's thigh, gently planting kisses along its length. V gasped as Judy suddenly lunged up and threw her weight against V, easily pushing V onto her back as Judy straddled her waist. Eyeing her, Judy ran her fingers through the straps of her underwear and quickly slid them off, tossing them aside. Feeling her heart pounding in her chest, V realized she was now the one who was trembling as Judy leaned forward to kiss her, her naked form pressing warmly against V's. Judy broke her lips away. "I want you too." Without hesitation, V brought her hand to Judy's shoulder and nudged her aside. Judy swung herself over to bring their most intimate parts to each other's mouths, and before V could think, she moaned loudly as she felt Judy's tongue lap across her folds. Raising her head up slightly, V lashed her tongue across Judy's clit and felt her shudder above her as she did so. As hard as V tried not to, she felt her body continue to shake as Judy made love to her. More than anything, she wanted to stay trapped in this moment, taking delight in how Judy sounded above her when her tongue moved against her. Before long, V could begin to feel herself edging closer to her orgasm. She pulled her mouth away from Judy as her hips began to quiver. When Judy slid a pair of fingers into her while she danced her tongue across her clit, V was thrown over the edge. Her body tensed and lunged upwards. "Oh, fuck, Judy!" V screamed. V came, breathing in ragged gasps as Judy worked into her as furiously as she could. Feeling herself go limp, Judy slowed her motions, bringing her down slowly before gently pulling her mouth away. Climbing off of her, Judy collapsed next to V, panting heavily.
"Not finished yet."
V knew Judy hadn't yet reached her peak, and although she could feel her heart pounding in an unnatural way, she pushed herself up and laid on her side next to Judy. Wrapping her mouth around Judy's breast, V worked her fingers lower and gently entered her, eliciting a gasp from Judy. "V, you don't," Judy moaned. Watching her intently, V continued her motions as she danced her tongue across Judy's nipple. A hunger set upon her as she thrust herself up from the bed and quickly lunged between Judy's legs, replacing her fingers with her mouth. Feeling Judy grab hold of her hair, V lapped furiously at her entrance. Just as Judy's breathing quickened and her body began to shake, V thrust her fingers into her while working her tongue across Judy's most sensitive spot. With a loud scream, Judy's grip tightened on V's hair as her hips thrust upwards. V opened her eyes, looking up at Judy as she came. Before long, she dropped back to the bed and released her hold on V's hair. With a final, gentle kiss, V slowly worked her way up and collapsed next to Judy. Her body was shaking, almost violently. Feeling Judy wrap her arm around her, V managed to nudge closer into Judy's breast as they both tried to catch their breath. Closing her eyes, V savored the moment, hoping it would never end. It was only when she heard Judy sobbing above her that V pulled away. She was on the verge of tears, her lip quivering. With effort, V forced her arm up to cup Judy's cheek. "Don't cry, baby," V whispered as she planted a kiss on Judy's lips. Instead, Judy's face scrunched together as tears slid out of her eyes. Breathing in sharply, she rested her palm on top of V's hand. How am I not supposed to cry, V? You're saying goodbye to me. A lump quickly rose in V's throat, and before she knew it, tears began to spill down her own cheeks. Judy was right. Everything she had just done had been with the intent of giving Judy something to remember, something which was final. A sob escaped her as she gripped tightly onto the chain around her neck. "I'm still fighting, Jude, just like I promised I would. Fighting for every fucking minute." As they laid together in the pink glow of the lights draped above them, V began to hum the familiar theme they both knew to Judy as they embraced each other tightly, fighting as strongly as they could to prevent the rise of the sun, the dawn bringing with it the promise of a new day.